At 3:04 local time, a B-2 Spirit with the call sign Phantom 21 was about 40 minutes from the target. It was flying a deep strike mission from west of Thrawn toward the Kaj missile factory, which was still steadily producing the missiles Iran was using to fire at U.S. forces. The pilots aboard the B-2 had no idea that their flight corridor had already been locked in by a radar system, one that by all expectations was not supposed to be there. On the threat warning display, a strange signal appeared: UHF, Chinese origin. And that happened to be exactly the frequency band where stealth shaping could not work to its full advantage. About 80 miles from the bomber, an EA-18G Growler with the call sign Venom 11 was the first to detect the signal. A short pulse flashed across the ALQ-28 wideband receiver. Wrong band, wrong frequency, completely different from what they usually saw. The electronic warfare officer was already reacting before the system had even finished classifying it. A confirmation line appeared on the display. New emitter detected, UHF band, bearing 085, correlated with YLC-8B. That call went out cold and sharp to every cockpit in the formation. About 40 miles to the north, Viper 1's F-22 Raptor, operating in total silence with no active systems turned on, also picked up the same emission through its passive AN/ALR-94 sensor suite. The F-22 carries more than 30 small antennas spread across its wings, fuselage, and tail. Each one listens to a different slice of the frequency spectrum. You can picture it like a house with 30 tiny computers hidden all over it. One hears footsteps, one hears a door closing, one hears a whisper. Put them all together, and you can tell exactly where the intruder is without ever turning on the lights. 3 emissions were enough to establish a bearing. 5 were enough to generate a grid coordinate with an error of only about 40 meters. Viper 1 passed the fix over Link 16 while still maintaining radio silence. This was exactly the moment when every member of the formation showed what they were really worth. The YLC-8B was a Chinese-built UHF radar, designed almost for one purpose alone: hunting stealth aircraft like the B-2. The B-2's stealth shape helps deflect radar energy off to the sides, but that advantage mainly works against shorter wavelengths. UHF operates with wavelengths measured in meters. At that scale, the tricks of stealth shaping begin to lose their effect, and the B-2's fuselage creates a reflection strong enough to be detected. On X-band radars, the Spirit's radar cross-section is as small as a marble. But in the UHF band, they can swell into something the size of a large bird, flying steadily at 42,000 feet and 475 knots. And there are not many geese cruising at around Mach 0.7 on such a steady heading. The enemy radar did not transmit continuously. It only swept in short bursts, each about 3 seconds long, then went silent. The operators knew perfectly well that if they transmitted non-stop, they would be practically inviting an anti-radiation missile to come straight at them. It was like a neighbor who fires up his lawnmower at exactly 6 o'clock every morning. Sooner or later, the whole neighborhood knows where he is and what he is doing, and eventually someone is going to snap. The only difference here is that snapping means a Mach 2 supersonic missile crashing right into your front yard. Each short sweep gave the American pilots a snapshot, and through those snapshots, a ghost was gradually taking shape. Inside the Growler, Venom 11's weapon systems officer started building a response. Jamming UHF is not like jamming the X-band radars they train against every week. It is not like drowning out your neighbor's TV through the wall. It is more like trying to overpower an entire marching band moving right down your street. To do that, he needed more power and more time. He was trying to get both, But on the other side, the YLC-8B operators could also see the American response starting to form on their screens. The nose of the aircraft was shifting. The radar picture was beginning to wash out. They knew they probably had only about 30 seconds left before something carrying a warhead came straight to their position. So they transmitted everything they could gather: bearing, altitude, and the approximate speed of a target flying east toward Thran. That data was pushed through Iran's already badly damaged air defense network, sent through buried fiber optic lines to every surviving interceptor system within a 200-kilometer radius. Total transmission time was only about 90 seconds. After that, the senior operator shut the radar down. It was a smart decision, but about 30 seconds too late. Venom 11 called Magnum and launched an AGM-88G on bearing 085. In NATO combat terminology, Magnum means only one thing: an anti-radiation missile has come off the rail. It is not a warning, not a request for permission, but a status call. At that moment, the missile was already moving at supersonic speed, already climbing, and already locked onto the YLC-8B's last known emission point. Venom 11 did not need to wait for anyone's approval. The threat had been confirmed, the shot was valid, and the weapon was on its way. That is how suppression of enemy air defenses works. No debate, just execution. The AGM-88G is the newest version of the high-speed anti-radiation missile family. The most important detail in this situation was its ability to remember the target. Older versions could lose the target if the enemy radar shut down. No signal meant nothing left to follow. But the G model has GPS and inertial guidance that remembers the exact position where the antenna was transmitting just seconds earlier. The radar operator could switch it off, but the missile already had the address. The next explosion turned the YLC-8B, a system built specifically to hunt B-2s, into a heap of wreckage in the Iranian countryside. China spent years creating a machine meant to see through stealth. The Americans turned it into a burning hulk in less than 90 seconds. But those 90 seconds of transmission were enough to do the one thing that mattered most. The radar was destroyed, but the data it sent kept moving through buried fiber optic relay points toward a Bavar 373 battery that had not emitted a single radar pulse since the first night of the war. At 0306, a fiber optic terminal inside Bavar 373 Battery 14 kilometers south of Karage, received its first data packet after 4 days of silence. Bearing, altitude, approximate speed, target heading east at 42,000 feet. Just by reading those numbers, the battery commander immediately understood what they meant. The track was rough, and the error could easily run to miles, but he did not need a perfect picture. He only needed to know where to look. Since the night of February 28th, when the unit drove the launcher into a ravine at the base of the Al-Bor range and draped camouflage netting over the Mirage 4 radar, this battery had lived in silence. For 4 days, they could do nothing but listen to a war they could not join. Hearing other Bavar batteries across western Iran fall silent one by one and disappear. The one decision that had kept them alive until this moment was to stay off the air until a target appeared that was worth trading the whole battery for. And now that target was in front of them. Within the next 60 seconds, he was going to turn on the radar and fire the most capable interceptor in Iran's inventory at the best protected aircraft in the American formation. The window for action was brutally short. The instant Mirage 4 lit up, every American sensor within 300 miles would start the countdown toward another harm. One shot, one trade. He reached for the power switch, brought it to full output, locked continuous track, and narrowed the scan sector exactly along the bearing the Chinese radar had just provided. What the Bavar commander did not know was that the AGM-88G that destroyed the YLC-8B had already been replaced by another one. Venom 11 was still fully combat capable. Inside Phantom 21, the B-2's defensive management system picked up the new emission immediately. Fire control quality bearing, 175, 14 kilometers south of Karagay. On the mission commander's display, a bright red diamond lit up, and the warning tone filled both headsets. Only 21 B-2s were ever built, each costing about $2.1 billion, the most expensive combat aircraft in history. And now, a fire control radar in the Iranian highlands had just founded. The mission commander immediately understood what had happened. The harm that destroyed the Chinese radar had not ended the threat. It had triggered it. Before dying, that radar crew had dumped everything they had into the network. That explosion was what gave the Bavar battery its firing chance. Venom 11 reacted almost instantly, switching the ALQ-249 over to the Mirage 4's frequency band. But that was not simple. Mirage 4 operated on a completely different band from the YLC-8B. The jammer had to retune and recalibrate from scratch. Trying to build a new jamming pattern against an unfamiliar waveform while under threat was like trying to tune a guitar to a song you have never heard before while someone at home is yelling at you to hurry up and come to dinner. You can do it, but you are definitely not doing it calmly. It took 5 seconds to lock the new frequency, then 3 more to start pumping noise into it. That job was handled by the ALQ-249 Next Generation Jammer, the most powerful airborne electronic attack system in the American arsenal. It finds the exact transmit frequency of the enemy radar and then pours amplified noise into it until the signal processor on the other end can no longer tell what is real. Radar works by sending out a pulse and listening for the echo coming back. That echo is the target. Jamming means flooding that same frequency with so much noise that the echo gets buried. The radar still transmits, the target still reflects. But now, for every one real signal, there are 10,000 false ones mixed in. The processor knows something is out there, but it cannot agree with itself on where it is, when it is there, or maybe whether it already missed it. Even so, Bavar's concentrated beam still found exactly what the queuing data had promised. A faint return, barely above the noise floor, consistent with a stealth aircraft at high altitude heading east. Not a clean track yet, but enough to sharpen the firing solution with every sweep. Venom 11 called Magnum again and launched the second AGM-88G on bearing 175. The missile screamed away, with about 60 seconds left to target. For someone staring down a fire control radar pointed straight at their bomber, 60 seconds is a lifetime. From the west, the HARM was closing on the Bavar battery at Mach 2, GPS locked, with its trajectory almost fully computed already. From the south, Mirage 4's beam kept tightening its track on Phantom 21 with every sweep. If Bavar fired before the HARM got there, the Sayad 4 missile would depend on whatever reflected signal quality Mirage 4 could still push through the jamming. If the illumination beam stayed clean enough, the missile would be guided well into the final area, close enough for its own seeker to finish the job. If the beam got heavily smeared, mid-course data would be poor. The search basket in the terminal phase would widen, and the odds of finding the target would drop sharply. Inside the Growler, the electronic warfare officer was watching only one number: the strength of the Mirage 4 signal trying to punch through his jamming. If it stayed pushed down, the missile would launch on garbage data. If it broke through, the Sayad 4 would get a clean ride into the target area. Inside the B-2, The mission commander watched the HARM time to impact ticking down, while the Bavar signal strength rose on his display. 40 seconds. The track was still degraded. 30 seconds. The Iranian radar processor was still fighting through the noise, trying to build better resolution sweep by sweep. 20 seconds. The firing solution crossed the minimum threshold. The Bavar commander decided to fire. The Sayyad 4 came off the rail, its solid fuel motor pushing it past the sound barrier in seconds. Mirage 4 kept illuminating Phantom 21 so the climbing missile would have something to ride. The Sayyad 4, about 20 feet long, is an Iranian-built interceptor reportedly capable of engaging targets out to around 300 kilometers. In its nose cone sits an active radar seeker, but at that moment, it was still blind. In the mid-course phase, the missile does not use its own radar at all. It rides the reflected energy from Mirage 4's beam, like following the path of a flashlight beam on a mirror. If the flashlight is destroyed, the missile goes blind until its terminal seeker wakes up. 3 seconds later, the HARM slammed into the Mirage 4 radar vehicle. The battery that had survived 4 days by staying silent no longer existed. 4 days of patience traded for 1 bad minute. But the Sayyad 4 kept flying on inertial guidance, heading toward where the target was believed to have been 3 seconds earlier. And those 3 seconds of data had been under continuous Growler jamming. The active seeker in the missile's nose still had not switched on. Nobody knew exactly when it would wake up. Not the Growler crew, not the B-2 crew, not even the missile in any practical combat sense. The target could be anywhere inside an uncertainty zone as wide as 2 miles. If the seeker switched on and found a stable reflected signal, the Sayyad 4 would close at 3 times the speed of sound. If it found nothing, it would keep flying until the motor burned out and then self-destruct. Meanwhile, Phantom 21 was only 3 minutes from bomb release. A missile was hunting a ghost in the dark. On the mission commander's display, the red diamond was still glowing to the south. The Sayyad 4 kept climbing past 30,000 feet. The green timeline bar across the top of the screen kept counting down to the bomb bay door opening. The problem was that they did not know whether the missile's seeker would switch on at 20 miles, 15 miles, or 10 miles. And when it did, it would scan in X-band, the exact frequency range the B-2 was designed to defeat. With the bomb bay doors closed, the Spirit's X-band radar cross-section was only the size of a marble. But once the doors opened, the equation changed completely. The bomb bay had to stay open for about 12 seconds. For just those 12 seconds, Phantom 21 would stop being as invisible as it had been. Opening the bay doors was like a person living under a new identity suddenly pulling off his disguise mask in the middle of a crowded room. If nobody looked at the right moment, he stayed safe. But if someone was staring straight at his face, all the disguise beforehand had been pointless. Phantom 21 reported that it was continuing the mission. The bay doors would open in 60 seconds. At that point, the Growler could do nothing more but wait. The ALQ-249 was already loaded with the Sayyad 4 seeker band, and the electronic warfare officer's finger was hovering, waiting for authorization to transmit. But jamming a frequency that was not yet on the air was like shouting into empty space. The seeker had to switch on first. Until then, the Sayyad 4 was just a ballistic object, flying on dead reckoning, unjammable, hard to detect, and wildly unpredictable. If the seeker turned on while the bay doors were still closed, it would be trying to find a marble in a haystack. If it turned on during those 12 seconds with the doors open, it would be looking at a barn door. 40 seconds to release. The female pilot took the stick from autopilot, with the kind of calm that comes only from having simulated this exact nightmare more than 100 times. If the defensive system screamed missile lock, she would have to maneuver immediately. A 150-ton flying wing at 42,000 feet is not something you hand over to autopilot in a life-or-death moment. That would be like letting cruise control handle it when a deer suddenly jumps into the road. Some things absolutely require a human being at the controls. The mission commander confirmed GPS acquisition on all 16 bombs. The targets were spread across the Kaj complex, the assembly building where missile airframes were mated with guidance packages, the clean room where seekers were calibrated, the motor plant where propellant was loaded into the casings. These were facilities Iran had built over decades, and they could not be replaced with a simple purchase order. The bomb bay doors opened. The rotary launchers turned into position, and the two doors swung wide. Every exposed surface now created reflective angles that bounced radar energy back much more strongly. The marble became a barn door. The Sayyad 4 was about 15 miles out by then, racing in at Mach 3.5, deep in the terminal phase. Its active seeker switched on. But what the missile's signal processor did not know was that Venom 11 had already been sitting on that exact frequency for 30 seconds. The ALQ-249 caught the seeker emission instantly. The electronic warfare officer shoved the jammer to full power, and the Growler flooded the seeker's X-band frequency with noise before it could complete its very first scan. The missile processor tried to filter out the interference and find one stable reflected signal, but it could not hold on to anything firm enough.
Stay on course.
The B-2 pilot held heading, altitude, and speed. Every instinct was screaming at her to brake left and dive, but the rational part of her mind forced her to stay on course. One by one, the GBU-31s came off the aircraft.
Turns a dumb bomb into a smart
Each one weighed 2,000 pounds.
30 feet, about 2 car lengths, showcasing its powerful accuracy.
Then 8, 12, and finally all 16 JDAMs dropped into the Iranian night sky. Each guidance tail kit, costing only about $25,000, had turned a dumb bomb into a weapon capable of landing within 30 feet of its aim point, about 2 car lengths. The bay doors closed, the barn door vanished, and the marble returned in less than a second. The Sayyad 4 seeker had been active for less than 10 seconds, and for every one of those seconds, its frequency had been under Growler control. It caught a brief bloom of the target when the bay doors opened, but the ALQ-249 buried that signal before the processor could build a stable track. No consistent return, no track, no lock. The missile kept coasting on inertia for about 8 more seconds, then self-destructed. A flash lit up the darkness south of Karachi, and by the next morning, nobody on the ground would likely understand what had happened. It was a complete miss. Iran's most patient battery commander had traded his whole unit for a final missile that ended up arguing with electronic noise. Phantom 21 banked west as the 16 JDAMs were only seconds from impact. The first 3 hit the eastern assembly area at tremendous terminal velocity. Each 2,000-pound bomb punched through the sheet metal roof like a knife through paper. These were not hardened bunkers. They were production buildings designed for efficiency, with 20-ton overhead cranes running on rails near the ceiling. The blast pressure ripped the structures apart from the inside. Those cranes, which had been used to lower Shahab 3 missile airframes onto precision assembly fixtures, were torn from their rails and came crashing down onto the alignment systems below. Those systems were like the molds in a machine shop, each part machined to tolerances finer than a human hair, sometimes taking weeks to calibrate properly. You could not just 3D print a replacement. You could not just open a catalog and order one. They became scrap in half a second. The second wave of bombs struck the guidance integration area. where missile seekers received their final calibration inside positive pressure clean rooms designed to keep out even microscopic dust. 2 direct hits collapsed the sealed chambers completely. The loading bays, where finished missiles were moved onto transporter erector launchers, became impassable wreckage. A complex that had taken decades to build was torn apart in just a few dozen seconds. And that is the real nature of a modern airstrike. Not just destroying the target in front of you, but wiping out the ability of an entire war industry pipeline to recover.